Well, folks, welcome. Future Work Scotland. It's nice to be back. It's been a while. Feels like it's been a long time since we moved to the monthly cadence. But nice to see a lot of familiar faces. I'm Sathpal Singh, everybody calls me Sath, and I'm your host for the session. I'm joined by my co-organiser, Donald Henderson. Nikki will be with us shortly. So just the usual. You remember we had a code of conduct. In short, we simply ask that you are respectful to one another. We want everyone to have a great experience. I'm a bit run down at the moment as well, sorry, so I'll try to keep the coughing and the spluttering to a minimum. In terms of Q&A, we'll keep the questions towards the end. Do stick them into the chat as they come into your mind. Prefix them with a Q, so the team and I can spot them, and then we'll relay them back to Rod at the end once he's been through his content. And we'll do the usual community shout outs at the end. So with that, yeah, I'm thrilled that Rod Judkins is our guest speaker for this session. Rod's got amazing history and experience. He's a writer of many amazing books. He's also a lecturer and speaker and an innovation creative consultant, and he's worked with some of the world's most well-known brands. He's also written the best-selling Art of Creative Thinking, and Donna was just holding up a second. And this amazing book, which I finished earlier this year, and I couldn't put it down. So I'm really chuffed that Rod's here to talk to us about this. It's an excellent read. I also did a short talk on this myself recently. That's how much I like it. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to learning more about unlocking creativity and making my work brilliant. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Rod. Rod, welcome.
Hi, thanks very much. I teach at Central St Martin's, and I work as a creative consultant to many of the world's big companies. And I'm going to come at things from a very kind of artistic angle, kind of art college angle. And that's kind of what I can bring to some of the big companies. They're kind of looking to see what we do in art college, and you'll see through my talk that how I have applied that to many different fields. So my book, Make Brilliant Work, it looks at about 80 famous designers and artists, and looks at how they work. And I'm just trying to get this going. Yeah, so it's called Make Brilliant Work. And it looks at over 80 artists and designers and analyzes their thinking and their process so that we can all apply it to whatever field that we work in. And it really came about from, I noticed at Central St Martin's that whenever I did a crit, the students, they always wanted the response to their work to be for people to say, wow, that's brilliant. And often their work was just got a lukewarm response, or sometimes it got, people said, oh, that's really good. But every now and then a student produced work and people just went, wow, that's brilliant. And I could sort of see that they all wanted that kind of response. And it's my job as a tutor at St Martin's to try to help them get that response. And so I've come up with lots of methods and techniques that they can use to make their work brilliant. So if they produce something mediocre, that they can work on it again and make it brilliant. And so I apply a lot of those techniques to companies when I'm invited in as a creative consultant. So tonight I'm going to go through a few chapters and hopefully you'll find them useful to you. I'm going to ask you to do like a few really short exercises. It might just be, they'll probably just be like a minute or two in length, just to kind of digest and think about what I've been saying. So yeah, I'm going to go through a few chapters and a few methods, and I hope they're going to be useful to you. If you'd like to contact me, these are my details. So yeah, feel free to get in touch, you know, any time you like. So let's get going. The first technique that I'd like to look at in the book is one called the 6 W's. It actually comes from Aristotle, who believed that you shouldn't do anything at all until you've worked out the 6 W's. So whatever work you're doing or whatever enterprise, you should work out these 6 W's before you even, you know, lift a finger. I mean, that's actually quite hard to do, as you'll see, but we'll look at them and have a go at them. So there are 6 W's, and they're all kind of aimed at making you understand yourself and what you're trying to do before you really start to do anything. I'm going to use, well, in the book, I use Mary Quant as a great example of somebody who almost on an instinctive level applied these 6 W's. So the first W is who. So you need to work out who you are, you know, what you are as a person, and really understand yourself. And Mary Quant tried quite a few jobs in offices and just temporary jobs, and she couldn't find anything that she really enjoyed doing. And then she came to the conclusion that she was somebody who could only work for herself, that she was going to have to be an entrepreneur. So that was kind of her working out who she was. She realized that there was that she couldn't work for anybody else. She tried lots of things and decided that she had to be an entrepreneur, or at least, you know, work for herself. The second W is where. So you need to work out where you should be. And she worked out that she should be on King's Road in London, because that was the center of fashion in the 60s. So it's essential to kind of be in the right place for yourself. So whatever field you're working in, you need to work out where's the center and put yourself there. In artistic terms, the center of the art world has moved from Paris to New York to lots of places through the centuries. But artists always gravitate to the central place, because that's where they meet minds that are like their own. So Mary Quant worked out that she needed to be on the King's Road, because that's where the buzz was and the excitement and people who thought like her. So that's the second W. So who, where. The third one is what, is working out what you should be doing or what's right for you. And Mary Quant saw a shop lease up for sale on King's Road. So she took over the shop. It was actually a cafe in the basement. So she started a cafe and then kind of developed it into a restaurant, but she didn't really enjoy it much. And above the restaurant, there was a sort of empty floor that she was renting but wasn't using. And she started to think that she should sell clothes there. So she started buying clothes from a wholesaler, which were very expensive, and slowly started to kind of build up a clothes shop. And because the clothes were so expensive, she thought that she would start to make the hats herself, because they were really expensive. So she started making hats, although she had no training and didn't, you know, was just making it up as she went along. And her hats were really popular and started selling. So then she moved on to things like dresses and jackets, but she didn't have any training. So she did her best. And then she hired a seamstress to help her, and then other seamstresses. And so her business kind of built up. But so she worked out what she should be doing, and she gave up the cafe and the restaurant and focused entirely on clothes. But this third, working out what you should be doing, what's the right thing for you is really important. And she kind of like grew into it. And this is one of her shop windows. She didn't know really how to lay out a shop window. So she kind of did almost like theatrical shop windows, which drew a lot of attention because they were so different to what everyone else was doing. But she knew, you know, what she worked out what she should be doing. Another one is, the fourth one is when, and that's kind of when working out when the time is right for you. You know, what's the right moment in your life. Or she also kind of tapping into the zeitgeist and working out, you know, when is the right time to be doing, you know, what the thing that you most want to be doing. And so, you know, the 60s and the beginning of the 60s was the right time for her, because London was full of clothes shops that sold really quite dull clothing, which she didn't like. So she thought it was the right time to introduce bright colors and a completely different kind of more modern look. And so, you know, she worked out what she should be doing at that time, or, you know, what would be the newest thing. So kind of tapping into the zeitgeist and working out, you know, when is the right time is the fourth W. The fifth one is with what. So she didn't have much money, so she started buying you know, cloth quite, you know, as cheaply as she could, and making the clothes as cheaply as she could. And so she did what she could with what was to hand. So it was, you know, she really didn't have the money, and she didn't have the money to buy the clothes from wholesalers. And so she, you know, it was a real stretch for her to buy clothes from wholesalers. It took a lot of her money. So she started making as much of the clothing as she could, as cheaply as she could. So, you know, you have to work out what you can do, you know, with what, you know, what is available to you, what materials, what's to hand, and then work with that. So the fifth W is with, and probably the most important one is why. And she knew why she was doing what she was doing. She wanted to change fashion. She thought the fashion that was available was really tired and dull, and she didn't like the clothes that were available to her. So she knew why she was doing what she was doing. And because of that, anyone who worked for her kind of felt that they were on a mission. You know, there was a reason and a purpose to what they were doing. So working out why you're doing what you're doing, you know, what's the purpose, is the sixth why, and probably the most important one. So yeah, that's Mary Quant. And so these are the 6 W's, and they started with Aristotle, but they've been picked up by the design world, and they can be applied to you as an individual, but also as a brand. I think we're working these out as a brand or company, or they could be for an individual, but they could be for an organization. So I'm going to leave these on the screen just for a minute, and I'd like you to think about the last one, really. Well, you can think about any that you want, but I'd like you to just think about why, and just spend 1 minute kind of writing down why you're doing what you're doing. What's the purpose? So we'll just have a quick 1 minute break while you have a think about that. And maybe it'd be really good if you could write that down, and then maybe at the end, when we come to the questions, we might dip into that, and some of you might want to say you know how you got on with that. So we'll just have a short 1 minute break. But if you could just write down, you know, think about why you're doing what you're doing. You might even think about some of the other W's as well. Okay, so going to move on, and I'd like to think about how creative people like problems. They kind of respond to problems and something going wrong, and having it often brings out the best in them. And one of the chapters is about Hergé, who created the Tintin books, and it's about a period in his life when he was very successful. It's about creative block, really. So Hergé suffered from creative block and just couldn't, think of any ideas, and just couldn't do any drawing. So he had a huge sort of creative block. And it's about a period in his life when he was very successful. He was quite wealthy, earning a lot of money. By that time, he was like the head of a big company. He had lots of assistants helping him with the work, but he was producing a lot of books, and he worked for a lot of newspapers, doing magazines for newspapers. So there was huge demand on him, and he felt under tremendous pressure, and he sort of had a kind of breakdown, and he just the publisher was pressurizing him for another book, and he just couldn't think of any ideas. And he started having nightmares about the blank page, just sort of staring at the white blank page, which I think a lot of artists and writers and all creative people, sometimes kind of hit that wall. So he had lots of nightmares about, which were about, kind of whiteness. His world was filled with snow, and he was like, in the nightmares, he was walking through snow and lost in snow. And so for the first time in his life, he went to see a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist said that Tintin was killing him. The pressure to think of new ideas for Tintin books and the magazines was killing him. And so he should kill off Tintin and, just end, because he was quite successful and wealthy. So why not? The psychiatrist said he should end the Tintin books. But Hergé went off and thought about it, and then he thought that Tintin was like creativity was the answer, not the problem. That creativity would be the solution. So he started just sketching Tintin walking around lost on the white page. So he did lots of drawings, and Tintin was just wandering around lost, which was what the state that Hergé was in. He just didn't know where to begin or what to do. And gradually he started, an idea started to form in his mind that Tintin was wandering around, searching for a friend. So a kind of story emerged in his mind that his friend had crashed into the Himalayas, and Tintin went to look for him. And it's a really strange book, because Tintin is just like, it doesn't have like all the usual characters of the other Tintin books. And page after page really is just Tintin wandering around in the Himalayas lost, which was kind of mirrored Hergé's state. And the original cover was just Tintin, lost in snow, and the publisher hated it and said, you can't just have, a white cover. So he slowly kind of added this kind of boulder down the front here, and then the publisher insisted on mountains in the background. So, but it was kind of interesting that Hergé had sort of cut things down to the real minimum. So it didn't have like the convoluted plots of the other books. It was really just Hergé, Tintin wandering around in the Himalayas lost. and it's his best book. You know, it's easily his, and a lot of people think it's his masterpiece, and I think it is, because it's just so unusual and just so, you know, to reduce things to that kind of level makes it a really unusual and fascinating book. It's almost a bit like a sort of Samuel Beckett kind of play or something. So, but what I'm getting at is that Hergé used Tintin to help him out. So it was this problem that he had that, and solving it made that like the best book that he'd ever written. So yeah, so I'm kind of thinking how creative people like problems. They search for them, and they kind of like it when something goes wrong. Whereas perhaps in everyday life, people kind of don't like it so much when things go wrong, but creative people really respond to it. This is the Lou Ruvo Center in Las Vegas, and it's a research hospital into Alzheimer's. And it was designed by Frank Gehry. And they asked Frank Gehry to design this research center into Alzheimer's, because at the time, Alzheimer's was a kind of little known affliction, and people, you know, it's very hard to get doctors to, you know, research doctors of a high caliber to work there or work on the Alzheimer's. So they were really struggling to recruit good staff. And so they came up with the idea of getting Frank Gehry to design a kind of iconic research center. And Frank Gehry was really interested in it because his father was suffering from Alzheimer's. So he had a kind of personal interest in it. And this is the design he came up with. And it's kind of supposed to be a sort of collapsing building. So it will look like a collapsing building because it kind of, you know, that kind of reflects the condition of Alzheimer's. And it worked. It became a hugely popular building and appeared in lots of design magazines and books, and is an iconic work of architecture. But more importantly, it had the right effect. It solved the problem of doctors and research scientists not wanting to work for look into Alzheimer's because it was unpopular or unfashionable disease at the time. So it drew the best minds to go and work there because it was such an iconic research center. So it solved the problem. So yeah, designers, architects, they like a problem to solve. This is a shoe designed by Arish Netawala, and he had the idea of this shoe when he was in California, and he noticed people queuing up to run up and down sand dunes. And he noticed there were really long queues of joggers and people wanting to run up and down the sand dunes. And he found out that they were running up and down sand dunes because it was a really good workout. So he kind of noticed these huge queues and thought, well, maybe I can solve that. And he came up with this shoe, which he's created this kind of very spongy webbing. And it has the effect of making you feel as if you're running on sand. So it gives you a really good workout. So he's mimicked exactly the effect of running on very kind of slippy sand. And but what I'm getting at is that, you know, he and other designers are always looking around for a problem, something that isn't working that they can then solve. Yeah, so this is about a talk that I had to give on Michelangelo. So I was commissioned to give a talk on Michelangelo in Dubai, and I was going to receive quite a large commission to do it. So I was really excited to do the commission, but it was to you know, a great many businessmen to a business conference, and I couldn't really think of a good angle. I teach at art college, so I've given a lot of talks on Michelangelo, and I didn't just want to give another talk and show his, his pictures and say all the usual things. I knew that stand up in front of a lot of people and talk, I needed like confidence, and I get that from talking about something that I'm really interested in. So I was trying to find an angle on him, and I happened to be in Rome when I got the commission. So I looked at his work in Rome, and when I came back to England, I looked at his work in the V&A or the cast in the V&A. So I was kind of searching for an angle on him. So it's a real problem for me to find something new to say about him. And I happened to stumble on someone who had written up about some documents in the Vatican. Someone had discovered Michelangelo's bank account. So all the records of his bank account were kept in the Vatican. And they were really interesting because in those days they had bank accounts exactly the same as we do. Every payment and all the details of who it was from, or who it was going out to, and the date and the amounts. So it was an amazing record of all of Michelangelo's bank account, and it was really interesting because it really revealed him. I mean, if you imagine looking in anyone's bank account, I think you probably discover a lot more about that person than but yeah. So one of the interesting thing, I suppose it was interesting because Michelangelo, all through his life and in his writing, he wrote a lot of poems about how poor he was and how the popes exploited him, and he didn't, he was a struggling artist all his life. But the bank accounts revealed that he was very rich from a very early age. And he was a bit like a Premiership footballer in his early 20s. He had masses of money, and he bought his family vineyards and huge houses and jewelry. And he owned lots and lots of vineyards himself. And those vineyards in turn produced a lot of money from the wine that they made. So it turned out he was a bit like Jeff Bezos or somebody. He was a real, a sort of wealthy entrepreneur, and but that gave me my angle. So the problem that I had was how to find something really different and interesting to say about Michelangelo, and his bank accounts gave me that angle. So having a problem and researching the problem is really an important factor. Because I write books on creativity, like I said earlier, I'm often invited to give or to work with companies and organizations. And about 5 years ago, I was lucky enough to be asked into the Royal Free Hospital to work with students there, medical students. And sometimes they have like a real project to work on, which is kind of doubly interesting. I mean, I'm invited in because some of the professors and surgeons there want their medical students to have more of a creative approach to problems that they encounter in medicine. So yeah, and sometimes sometimes we work on a real project, which is great because I really feel like I'm doing something worthwhile when I'm doing that. One of the projects was to do with a new drug that had been created, which had an amazing effect on people who had a liver problem. It dissolved the fatty tissue around their liver. So it's an amazing drug, and it saved them having to have liver transplants later on. But the problem with it was that it had to be taken every 4 hours on the dot, and the patients just weren't taking it on time. They were leaving it for an hour or two, or even forgetting, or not getting up in the night to take it. So that was their problem, and they tried to solve it by sort of scaring patients into taking it with lots, by sending them lots of written information about, you know, how not taking it on time would make it not work. And so they sort of flooded their patients with information. So they, you know, it's a project I worked on them, was trying to solve this problem of getting the patients to take the drug every 4 hours. And I kind of try to get them to be more playful in their approach, you know, because when you're to be creative, you have to be playful and, you know, take risks and be irreverent. So I got them to be more playful. And eventually we kind of came up with the idea of a game that we would create an app, and they would tell the app as whenever they were taking the pill. So it was like a game to take it on time, and it worked really effectively. They suddenly started to take it on time. And then we kind of extended the app so they could play against other people who had the same problem. And, you know, so the more often they took the pill on time, the kind of more points they got, and they got ahead of other people. So we made it into a game. And so, yeah, I'm kind of thinking about how, you know, it's really nice to have a problem to solve, and that creative people search for a problem and need a problem. So I'd like you to think about a problem that you would like to solve, or that kind of interests you, or what kind of problem that you have at the moment that you need to solve. And think about this search for a problem. So we'll just take a minute on this, just for you to kind of write down your thoughts about what kind of problem you would like to solve, or what problem you have at the minute that needs solving. So I'm just going to take a minute for you to stop and think about that and just write that down. Okay, so we're going to move on, and another chapter in the book is focuses on needing to work out what your passion is, or what really drives you. This is a quote by George Orwell about writing, and most writers say that writing a book is a real ordeal for them, and something that they, writing a book is a real struggle. And I have to say, I find writing a book is like a real marathon, and there's always problems that keep arising. And even when you think you've finished, then you're dealing with the publisher and the editor. So most sort of worthwhile projects are a big kind of, big undertaking. And to get through it, you need to be really passionate about what you're doing. And what happens a lot, I think, with a project is you start off with enthusiasm, and then about halfway through, when this happens with a book, I think you suddenly hit by just how, just what you've taken on, and there's lots of problems start to emerge. And to get through that, you need to be really passionate about what you're doing. And in the book, I concentrate on the making of the film Jaws, and I kind of talk a lot about all the problems that arose and how Spielberg enjoyed the problems. And I think that's one of the sort of key things which you know, more and more problems emerged throughout the filming. And instead of it kind of getting him down, it kind of lifted him up. He kind of enjoyed the more problems that arose, and he enjoyed solving them. So I think it's well documented that the shark kept sinking and kept having mechanical problems, and the crew got very fed up with waiting around and trying to, you know, kept sinking to the bottom of the sea, and they had to keep searching for it and bringing it back up. And because of all the problems, the actors kind of had a lot of time sort of sitting around, so they started reading the script through and kind of rethinking it and kind of rewriting their own parts or adding ideas to their own parts, and that really helped the script, because Spielberg started without a script. He didn't like Peter Benchley's script, which was based on his book that he wrote, and so they started without a script, and that was a problem. And Spielberg kept trying to rewrite it while filming, and but he kind of enjoyed all these problems, and it was because he was really passionate about the film, it kind of drove him through them. And in the end, they kind of found ways to kind of make the shark kind of work in very shallow water. And because the shark looked so terrible on film, they kind of cut and edited the shark out a lot, and that kind of helped the suspense. So what I'm getting at is that he was really passionate about film and really passionate about turning the book into a film, and that drove him through all these problems that kept arising. And I think any project that you do, you have a lot of problems arrive. And even if you're a creative person, a lot of the problems are to do with other people not doing their job properly and trying to work with other people. And to get through that, you need to be really passionate about what you're doing. So I'd like you to think just for a minute about whether you're really passionate about what you're doing, and what is your driving need, and what are you really passionate about, and just write down a few thoughts about that. So again, just 1 minute just to think about this. But if you could write down a few thoughts, and then maybe at the end, you might talk about them or ask questions about that aspect. So just 1 minute just to write down a few thoughts on that. Okay, going to move on and think about another chapter, which is about working out what you hate. So it's based on what do you hate, and it's really about thinking about something that you hate can lead you to understand what you like. And the chapter is based on Dr. Seuss, who he really hated the Dick and Jane books. So the Dick and Jane books dominated children's books in America at the time. And Dr. Seuss really hated them because they kind of taught children to think of themselves as little adults and be really responsible, and to try and copy adults. And Dr. Seuss thought that was against the spirit of children, that children were playful and should have fun and be irreverent. And so he really hated the Dick and Jane books and thought that they were everything that a children's book shouldn't be. And so he decided to write something that was the exact opposite. So that, you know, knowing what he really hated helped him to produce books like The Cat in the Hat. That was the first book he wrote. And in the Cat in the Hat, the cat kind of encourages children to be playful and have fun and be irreverent. And Dr. Seuss thought that was in the spirit of childhood and the kind of, you know, would be entertaining for children rather than them being lectured to and trying to be made into little adults. But it took him over a year to write. You might look at it and think, oh, that could be done really quickly, but it took him over a year to write. And it was very much based on trying to do the opposite of the Dick and Jane books. And so it took him a long time. And, you know, he had a lot of doubts about what he was doing. And when he had finished it, he found it hard to get a publisher because it was so different to any book that had gone before. But he was really passionate about his book because he really hated the Dick and Jane books. And eventually they were published and were a huge success. But what I'm getting at is that sort of knowing what he hated helped him to work out what he wanted to do. Also in the chapter, I look at Memphis, which is a design group, and they were well, before they were called Memphis, they were a collection of designers who were asked to produce some work for an exhibition, design some furniture for an exhibition, and they got together and had a meeting. And they couldn't decide on what they wanted to do. They kept arguing about what they liked, and people liked different things. And so the meetings just went on, and they never couldn't come to a conclusion. So one of the designers called Sotsas, he said, why don't we try and work out what we hate? And so they sat down and worked out what they hated. And they hated this kind of furniture, which was sort of minimalist furniture, which dominated the kind of thinking of the time. It was very minimal and very austere, and it was kind of colorless because you had to justify everything that you put into a design had to have some kind of intellectual justification, and so the lines were very simple and there was no color. So they worked out what they hated, and then they designed the exact opposite, and this is what they came up with. So really colorful furniture, which had kind of design elements that were just thrown in for the sheer hell of it, that were fun to do and fun to make and fun to sit on. So they did the exact opposite of what the kind of Bauhaus modernist rules were. So they kind of almost like looked at the rules of modern design and then set about deliberately breaking all of them. And they had a lot of fun. And it became known as Memphis. And it's one of the, kind of went down in design history as one of the first kind of postmodern design movements. But what I'm getting at is that they worked out what they hated. You know, when they were trying to decide what they liked, they all liked different things and couldn't come to a conclusion. But sometimes if you kind of don't know what you want to do, if you work out what you really hate, what other people are, you look around at what other people are doing and work out what you really hate, that can help you decide what to do. So I'd like you to just spend a minute thinking, maybe answering some of these questions. What is wrong that you want to put right? What do you hate about your field of interest? Who do you most dislike? What work do you most dislike? And then, think about try and work out what you most hate. And then that might lead you to think about what you would most like to do. So again, I'm just going to leave these up and give you a minute just to hopefully just write down a few responses to this, and we might look at them in the Q&A section. Okay, so we're going to move on, and I'm just going to drop in a sort of, I'm just going to whiz past these next two, to be honest. I just want to talk about Zaha Hadid. So one of the chapters in the book is about Zaha Hadid. And I kind of talk about an occasion when she came into one of the universities that I taught at, and she was a famous architect by then, and designed some iconic buildings. And she came in, and I was lucky enough to meet her. She came in to give a talk in the lecture theatre, and I was lucky enough to kind of meet her in the staff lounge just before she gave her talk, where she had like a cup of coffee and a packet of crisps. And in the book I write about how she she was eating a packet of crisps, and every crisp that she took out, she kind of held it up and had a really good look at it, and she kind of studied it before she ate it. But every crisp that she took out, she really had a good look at. And I asked her kind of why she was looking at them, and she said that she was really interested in the shape of them, and just found them really inspiring. And they come through in some of her designs. That she was really interested in crisps. She thought they were really fascinating shapes. And it just kind of really struck me how, even when she was eating a bag of crisps, she was really studying them and looking at them. And later on, I kind of showed her around the studios where the students were working, and she was really fascinated by their work. We'd done a kind of really quick, I'd set them a really quick project where they had kind of 15 minutes to design and make a model of a building, and they'd just done it with whatever was to hand, coffee cups and bubble wrap and whatever they could get. And she was really interested in what they had done and was talking to them. And she kind of said, well, I think I'm going to try and work more quickly because it's much more kind of intuitive. But what I really got from her was that she was like a sponge. She was walking around, and she was very humble. She wasn't like, like, you know, like a sort of thinking, oh, well, I'm a great architect and I've got nothing more to learn. It was the exact opposite. She was really trying to learn from the students and looking at their work, and was like a sponge, asking about the projects we'd set. And so I kind of write about that in the book, that that kind of desire to learn and be constantly you know, learning from what you see around you was kind of a real lesson to me. I might just look at one more thing, and then I feel like I've been talking for a long time, so I might just look at one more thing. Actually, I'm just going to jump to Dale Chihuly, who's a glass maker, and he was a successful glass maker and had a good business, and it was going well, and he had quite a few people working for him. I think it was something like sort of 15 people, employees working for him. So he was a glass blower, and glass blowing at the time was very much about symmetry. And, you know, you were judged by the symmetry of your work. And he had an accident. He was involved in a car accident, and he lost the sight in one of his eyes, which meant that he could no longer judge symmetry. So it was a disaster for him and for his company. And so he was really kind of stuck because he couldn't blow the glass and make it symmetrical. So he tried to teach his assistants, but they couldn't really do it in the way that he had done it. And then he had another accident and damaged one of his arms. And at glass blowing, you have to hold a really heavy rod. And so he could no longer hold the rod. So all of a sudden, you know, the company depended on him, and he couldn't hold the rod to blow through to make the glass, and he couldn't do the symmetry. So he kind of went with the fact that he couldn't do anything symmetrical anymore, and he started making asymmetrical glass. And he kind of got the inspiration from sea creatures, and so he kind of deliberately made asymmetrical glass, and it was a huge success. It kind of transformed him. His work is now worth millions, and he has a huge force working for him. And I kind of getting at in the chapter is that he kind of went with you know, responding to what he couldn't do. He kind of found a way around it, and you know, doing the opposite of what was expected made him a huge success. And that kind of like just kind of responding to whatever happens and going with it, and trying to find you know, an advantage in a disadvantage is a kind of key to creative thinking. I think I might just stop there and let you ask questions, or I'm not quite sure what the usual format is if somebody wants to ask a question, or
We ask our attendees to drop them in the chat, Rod.
okay.
I'm usually happy to open it up. I've not got anything so far. I've got a couple for you, but I'll keep them in reserve and hope that somebody else is going to take advantage of the opportunity and of you being with us in this event. Any questions for Rod, folks?
I'll just flick back through some of the slides. Yeah, so it's a book where, I mean, did anyone get anywhere with any of the questions that were asked?
Anybody want to share? Folks, you're welcome.
I did. I've got a question though about the whole 6Ws process.
Yeah.
So would you, if I wanted to use them with the team at work, what sort of format, what sort of organization does it take to pull those questions together?
well, it depends on the company or the organization, but you need to sort of work out who you are, you know, what you're about as a company. But the who you are thing is really about sort of being authentic. And if you take someone like Jackson Pollock, you know, I believe him, and I believe in his work, because I know that he spent 20 years developing his kind of dribble painting technique, and I've seen thousands of drawings and thousands of paintings that he did working it out. So kind of you know, being authentic makes people kind of believe in you. So working out who you are and being, you know, what is authentic about you, that is the what, you know, what the who question is. Where is making sure that you're in the right place. So it may not even be like the right about the physical place. It might be where you are online or who you're connecting with online. But the where is very much about kind of being in the right place to connect with other people.
So it could also be frame of mind.
Yeah. Definitely kind of where you're at as a person, if it's on a personal level. You know, what is making sure that your company is doing, you know, what it's most interested in. So someone like Steve Jobs was very keen that Apple didn't get sidetracked into other projects. He wanted it, you know, in the early days to be very focused on developing a laptop. You know, being focused on what you're most interested in is a kind of key thing, because, you know, it's very easy to get sidetracked or kind of sort of disperse your focus. But yeah, I mean, I suppose it takes a bit of imagination to work out, you know how they would apply. But I mean, Aristotle was quite strict on them. He thought you had to apply all of them before you could do anything. And
wow.
But yeah, that's a bit. But yeah, that they've come down to the design world, and the design world use them a lot. It's really about sort of thinking things through. And I always think the last one is the most important, really. You know, why you're doing what you're doing, particularly for a company, because, like I said, with Mary Quant, everyone working for her knew why they were creating new fashion and new ideas and bringing in brighter colors and more modern cuts. They all kind of bought into it and believed in what they were doing and understood their purpose. So
that's like the vision then of
yeah. So the why is what I always think is the most important one.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Rod.
Okay.
There's a few coming in now, but just before I go back to the chat, I've got one for you. So obviously I've read the book, loved it. A lot of the stories really appealed to me. And one of the ones I really liked was the one about Roald Dahl, how he'd invented the valve, and how he'd do what you ought not to do. You got an example of a situation where you did something you ought not to have done?
Yeah, I mean, going back to the hospital that I work in, the environment there is, I mean, I've brought in to introduce creativity and to try to get the students to think of more creative solutions. And the problem with working in a hospital is that it's very ethical. I mean, it's not really a problem, but the problem from the point of view of trying to be creative is that they're very serious about what they're doing. And if you want to be creative, then being serious doesn't help you. It hinders you. It kind of restricts you. So one of the projects, I set them the task of trying to, but it was actually about it's a kind of biochemistry thing. I set them the task of trying to create a bond weapon that would a kind of weapon of mass destruction that would be a biohazard, and so that was the project. So it's the exact opposite of what they were expecting and what they would normally do. And then we kind of unpicked it and turned it around a bit like that, the kind of Dr. Seuss thing, really, sort of turning it around. So yeah, so often in the hospital, you know, understandably, they're very serious about what they're doing and very ethical, and that can really restrict you when you're trying to think of ideas. So when you're trying to think of ideas, you have to be really irreverent. So I often, you know, make them do things which you know, really kind of break all the rules. But towards the end, obviously, that's when you then get, you know, when you've had a lot of ideas, that's when you then start getting serious about them and you know, developing them further. But yeah.
Nice, thank you. I've got one here that's quite long from Jim. Okay, right, it's about curiosity. So Jim's asking, so curiosity has played a major role for each of the individuals, or some of them, I guess, that you've highlighted. What, if anything, are you aware of that the folks said wrote about curiosity? I'm guessing being curious. Yeah, so he's curious about their curiosity levels. And was there anyone that, you know, you would pick out, or did you know about them from that particular perspective, I guess? Curiosity.
Yeah, I think that it's just a trait of creative people, really, that they're very curious and always sort of searching for a new area. And a lot of the people that I wrote about in the book are always sort of searching for the next thing. They're always trying to be ahead of the curve, and always searching for always thinking about the future. And part of that is the curiosity thing. So yeah, being curious is a kind of key thing with creativity. I can't think of offhand. There is a chapter in the book where I focus on somebody, but I can't think of it offhand. But yeah, I think it's just a trait of creative people. Yeah,
that's good. I was thinking through as well whether there was one that jumped out at me that kind of aligned with what Jim was asking. I couldn't think of one. So we've got one here from Bridget. If you have already created something but want to improve from mediocre to brilliant, it's like the students in your first story. Where would you start, and how do you know it's time to scrap it and start fresh instead of wasting more effort?
It's very hard to know when to scrap it. I mean, my students are always like getting halfway through a project and wanting to scrap it, and I always try and make them persist with something, because most things look pretty terrible halfway through. And it's very important to just keep working at things and keep trying to find ways to solve things. Otherwise, you just keep starting projects, and the moment they get difficult, you sort of scrap them. But in the book, I list a whole kind of ways that you can improve things. That's one of the things I also do in the hospital. I try and get them to have a mentality of trying to improve things. So if there's a surgical procedure, then after it, then we kind of analyze how it could have been improved. So we think about the tools that were used, and was there one that could be improved? You know, could the surgeons working in the theatre have worked together in a different way that would have improved what they were doing? So we kind of analyze sort of every aspect of you know, something that's been done, and try and work out, really study each aspect and try and work out how it could have been improved. And it's really a mindset of just not accepting things the way they are. You know, most jobs, people just, if you're a surgeon, you just kind of start to accept the tools that you work with. But they're really, the surgeons who come up with new procedures and really move medical science on are the ones who are not satisfied with what they've got and are always thinking about how they could improve something and come up with some new ideas. But there are sort of things that can be done. But yeah, I talk about them in the book. There's kind of like a few things you can go through that to kind of sort of methodically work out how to improve something.
Great, thank you. An interesting one here from Sheila. So kind of back to curiosity a little bit. So where are the curious creative people in terms of neurodiversity? Is that something you've got some knowledge of, something you can comment on?
I think that all the sort of studies that I've read into, creativity and the creative mind is this thing about how they're never satisfied with what they've got, and they're always looking around for new ideas and new sources of inspiration. And I think it's probably true of like scientists who make great breakthroughs. They're always curious about putting new combinations of things together. And from I've read a lot of books where scientists have studied creative people, and curiosity is one of the big traits.
Great. So in your view then, I mean, are people born creative, or is that something they learn?
I think it's something that they learn. I think that creative people do tend to have certain traits, like irreverence is one that I was talking about earlier. I think that they tend to not accept the rules and almost deliberately challenge things, a bit like Dr. Seuss with the challenging the way that children's books were at the time. They tend to be very irreverent and question things. And but I think that creativity can be made. There are certain things that you can do, and I hope I've touched on a few tonight. I think that often I go into a business and they start by saying, oh, we're not creative, but I look around at what they're doing, and what they're doing seems to be very creative to me. They're all working in a company that's producing something, and to them it's just like their day job, so they don't feel creative. But to me, coming in, they're producing something and doing something worthwhile, so it looks creative to me. But I think it depends. If people tend to think that creativity is writing a poem or doing a painting or something, but I think of it in much more kind of down to earth terms. It's how you go about your day-to-day life and your approach to quite ordinary things that you do. So yeah, I think it can, you can make yourself creative, and there's certain things that you can adopt. Hopefully my book goes, is a help with that. In the book, I don't just, every chapter, I don't just talk about a creative person. I talk about someone who, from the non-creative world, so to speak, and how they're, that the method has worked for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So Loic, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I hope so. Just a kind of additional comment to the creativity bit. So he's saying, is everyone not born creative, but the system tones it down over the years? I'm guessing is what you mean. Sure, you've got a view on that because you're trying to help people be creative.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's probably environments where that's squashed.
I think that, working in some of the universities I work in, they have like maths departments and physics departments, and when I'm talking to other, professors and tutors in other fields, they would say the same thing. Like I was talking to one of the professors of mathematics, and he said that he thought that maths was killed off in school and made into a really boring subject, and so he didn't. So the best students didn't come through to university to study mathematics. He said it was an exciting subject, but at school it's killed off and made into something really boring. And I think most at university, most people would say the same thing. And I think that's true of creativity at school. It's kind of like stamped on and crushed, but I think that's part of the system, really, that it applies to all fields. I think it's not really until they get to university and then things are kind of opened out a bit more, I think, and sort of widened out to more possibilities.
Yes, that's very good points. Thank you. Any more questions, folks? I've got a couple more myself, but yeah, we've maybe got time for maybe 2 or 3 more.
Okay.
I think Rod's admirably gave a lot of great insights this evening. So just while we wait on others coming in, I think there's about 80, I think I counted 80 stories, case studies, I'm not sure what word you prefer. A lot of very inspiring people. Any standouts for you? Any of them, real great
Yeah, I have one.
to you?
I have one for Rod. Where are you on your curiosity journey, Rod? What are you gonna do next? How do you feel eternity compared to what you just said about the curiosity addiction that these people have that you've studied?
Well, I'm writing my next book, kind of halfway through it, and it's kind of the process for publishing is you come up with an idea for a book, write some of it, then put it to your agent, and they kind of decide whether it's kind of whether it's got possibilities, and then they put a package together and approach the publisher. And it's at that stage at the moment the publisher's having a think about it, and I can't really talk about it because it's kind of in the process. But yeah, that's where I'm at, and so I'm kind of like moving on to the next book, and it's always like strange, really, because you're always kind of moving on to the next thing, and I've kind of like sort of half written the book after that, so to speak. So I'm kind of like more or less finished the next book, and then I kind of more or less written the book after that. But I have lots of ideas for books, and I tend to write them up, and so I have like 3 or 4 books on the go at any one time, and then the one kind of emerges as the one that I kind of am most interested in, and focus on more and kind of build it from that. So I've always got more ideas for books than I can possibly write, because a book is quite a lengthy process, and just the sort of publishing angle of it, just the work that goes into the sort of with the publisher and the meetings and the developing of the book is quite a lengthy process.
I would like to give you the opportunity to save me from self-destruction, if you want. No pressure.
Okay.
What's your? Do you have any creativity management system? You mentioned all the ideas for books, and I can identify very much with etc. But it very quickly gets out of hand. So I can only imagine that writing a book in its own is a very difficult task to organize in your mind. So with all those other ideas for other books and maybe other projects, do you have a creativity management system for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, when I'm writing a book, I try and stay focused on, I try and make sure the book has a theme, and then stay focused on that theme. So often I find myself writing a chapter, and it's something I'm really interested in, but then I suddenly realize that it doesn't fit with the theme of the book, and so I kind of put it to one side and then move on to something that does fit with the theme. So staying sort of focused on the theme of whatever you're doing is the sort of key thing, and that comes back to the kind of 6 W's, and making sure that you're doing what you're most interested in. And so yeah, I've got loads and loads of chapters which are half written, which I kind of abandoned, not because I didn't think I thought the subject was really interesting, but it just didn't fit with the theme of the book that I was writing. So, like you say, I found myself going off on a tangent and then realized it and stopped and came back to the theme. So it does take like self-discipline to be creative. It's something people always underestimate. And so, yeah, it takes self-discipline to sort of, define what you're trying to do and stay with it. So I hope you're not going to have a creative breakdown now.
And I've been battling that for most of my life. It's a very tough thing to deal with. But do you have any? Let's say I read all your books, and I want to read on. I want to research. I want to find other life stories of very creative people, like the lady you started to talk with, or Zaha Hadid. Where do you go? Do you go sit at a huge library in London and just read everything they have there? Oh, what do you get your references from?
Well, I'm lucky that I work in a university and 2 or 3 universities, and the students are always coming up with telling me things that they've read about or exhibitions they've seen. Sometimes it's like artists who come in to give a talk. So I suppose I get a lot of input from kind of people talking about things, and I do get ideas from reading other books, but I find I get more from other people just telling me things, telling me about someone they've met, or somewhere they've been, or but I've always got my antenna up because I write books. I'm always kind of, somebody mentions something, I'll start quizzing them about it and sort of questioning them and trying to find out more. So I get more from other people, really. But than reading books, I think. I'm slightly sort of wary of getting too much information from other books, because then you're sort of like writing a book that's based on books rather than something that you've experienced. Or so in the book I try to talk a lot about the work that I do in the hospital or wherever, so that it's something real, I suppose.
Thanks, Rod. We're coming up to time, so I'm going to bring the questions to a close here. I think you've done an admirable job of answering questions, give us great insight. I've got one last final one for you. Your book doesn't have a foreword. If you were to pick someone out of all these people that you've written about, who would you love to have written your foreword?
Gosh.
Don't have to be alive, obviously.
I wrote a chapter about Salvador Dali, and it's about how he was really focused on sort of promoting his work. He was a very shy person, but he obviously really cared about his work and wanted people to see it. So he did a lot of sort of stunts and kind of promotional things to make people aware of him. So probably Salvador Dali, because I know people who have some of my tutors when I was a student had met him and told me stories about him, and that kind of made me even more impressed by him. So yeah, Salvador Dali. I know he's not alive now, but yeah.
Just curious.
Yeah,
Curiosity people, so that's a nice answer.
yeah, but I'd just like to thank everyone for coming and asking questions, and I hope you've got something from it. And if you, I'll see if I can find my, yeah, that's my email and Instagram and stuff. So if anyone wants to keep in touch, that would be great. I always like to hear from people.
That's it. No, just to say thank you.
Thank you.
That was an excellent session. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Great to host you. Your book was really inspiring to me, so it's been a real privilege to have you here this evening. And I'm sure everybody feels the same way. We had some nice comments in the chat. I'm going to give you a little round of applause. Anybody's welcome to join me in the remaining minutes. Getting through there. Everybody's muted. So no, thank you. That was excellent, and I'm sure people will get in touch. Thanks for sharing your details.
Yeah.
Just to wrap up, folks, we moved to the monthly cadence. As you know, it did feel like a long time since the last one. Our final one of the year is in early December on the 8th, and that's with Daniel Mizik. Some of you might know Daniel. He's been in the Agile space for some years. He's written a number of books himself, and he's a kind of founder of this sort of open sort of leadership network. Good guy. So I'm really chuffed that we've got Daniel coming along to close the year out for us. So if that's of interest to you, do get signed up. As I'm sure many of you know, who follow us on Meetup, etc. We've already got a whole bunch of events in the calendar for 2022. So take a look at those and pick out ones that are of interest to you. And I think that's probably it for tonight. Thanks again for joining. Thanks for all your participation. Really enjoyed it. And we hope we'll see you again soon. Stay safe, folks. Thank you very much. Good night. Well, enjoy your day.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rod. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Thanks, folks.